Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining today's webinar, Thinking Outside the Out-of-Network Box, New Savings Options for Benefits Advisors. This webinar is sponsored by Contigo Health. Contigo Health, a subsidiary of Premier Incorporated, is a health benefits platform that leads direct-to-employer and direct-to-provider relationships that drive more affordable and appropriate care. Contigo Health is relentlessly focused on revolutionizing healthcare through cost-effective, transparent, comprehensive access, and thoughtful program design. At its core, Contigo Health ConfigureNet, with over 900,000 network providers across 4.1 million U.S. locations, helps improve access to care. ConfigureNet provides health plan payers and their health plan members medical claim savings through pre-negotiated discounts with network providers. ConfigureNet is differentiated by Contigo Health's high-performing benefits optimization products, including Sync Health Plan Administration TPA and Payvider Activation Solutions and Centers of Excellence 360 programs, including substance use disorders, cancer, and orthopedics. For more info, please visit contigohealth.com. I'm Sean Edwards from Validation Institute, and I will be introducing our webinar today. Just a couple of quick announcements before we start. Due to the number of attendees, participant lines are muted. However, if you'd like to submit a question for our speakers, please do so using the Ask a Question box that you see on your screen, and we'll answer all questions that we have time to address during our session today. Also, please note the webinar is being recorded and you'll receive an email with a link to the video so that you can view it again. Now I'd like to introduce our moderator for today. Nick Napier is an account executive with Brown & Brown Insurance. We are pleased to have him here. Nick, welcome. Without further ado, I'm going to turn things over to you.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Sean. And thank you to all of you joining us in attendance today as we're going to dive into a discussion around some out-of-network benefits and how we have some unique solutions that Contigo team has brought to the table for clients and benefit advisors across the country. So I'm very excited. We've been able to assemble a panel of some industry leaders on this particular topic, and I'm really looking forward to where our conversation is going to take us here over the next 60 minutes. So I'm going to start by giving our panelists an opportunity to introduce themselves and provide a little bit of a background on their experience. So we're going to go ahead and start with Jen Lessick. Jen is a sales director, the director of sales for repricing and PPO networks with Contigo Health. Jen, if you'd like to take a moment to introduce yourself, feel free.
Hi, everybody, and good afternoon. Thank you for joining us today. I'm really excited to be speaking with everybody. As he said, I'm Jen Lessick. I'm a veteran in this industry. I've been in healthcare about 28 years, and I've done just about everything. I've been in sales, product development. I ran national PPO networks. I put together cost containment strategies for TPAs and vendors. I have been in the technical BPaaS and SaaS solutions side of our business, and I've worked for general agencies. So I'm very happy to be here. Cost containment and PPO networks is my love of everything I've done in our industry, and I'm very grateful to be at Contigo working with our great team in the cost containment space.
Thank you and welcome, Jen. Next, we have Mike Hill. Mike is the founder of Total Control Health Plans. Mike, feel free to provide an update if you'd like to.
Thank you very much, Nick. It's great to be with everybody today. Just some real quick background on me. I'm a benefit advisor, been in the industry since 2001. And in 2017, we founded Total Control Health Plans as an alternative to the traditional solutions that employers were receiving in the marketplace. So we're not a product, but we're a philosophy. And what we ultimately do is help employers build custom self-funded plans from the ground up, where they can see and touch and move every single part within the plan. So I'm really excited to be part of this conversation today because out-of-network claims can sneak up on you in a hurry and really have a huge impact on plan performance. So I'm excited to learn more about the Contigo program and talk about strategies we can use to address out-of-network claims.
Thank you, Mike. The last panelist I would like to introduce is Mr. Tom Hetherington. Tom is the network segment leader with Contigo Health. Tom, if you'd like to do a brief introduction, please feel free.
Hey, thank you. Very excited to be here as well. As you mentioned, I lead the network division of Contigo Health and come out of a mostly consulting background, was with Accenture in the health strategy division, and then worked with a number of early stage health companies and came across this Contigo Health. And as I learned more about what Premier was doing with high value networks and in their strategy. Got very excited, decided to come on board with Stephen Nelson, and have been here since 2018 and now lead the network division. Thank you.
Wonderful. Now that we have our panelists introduced, I think we'll go ahead and jump into our Q&A section of our presentation. So we're going to go ahead and kick it off here. Tom, we'd like to come back to you with our first question that we've got. With respect to out-of-network claim spend, what is the scale of this issue, and what percentage of the total claim spend is this impacting at the end of the day?
Yeah, so basically, if you look across the United States, numbers around 12% are what you'll see, but that's heavily biased towards the large employers. So for any given, let's say any given self-funded health plan, it could be anywhere from 8 to 15%, something like that. So it's not a majority of the spend, but it's meaningful enough where it has an impact. And certainly with some of the things we'll talk about here in terms of the post-pandemic world, we think it's going to become, more of a challenge.
Thank you. Jen, I wanted to give you an opportunity to provide your opinion on the scale of this issue here and the percentage that you're seeing in total claim spend from your perspective.
Well, it's an issue that's never going to go away. You're always going to have members that, for whatever reason, are going to be out of network. There are some providers out there, just specialty providers, that just don't contract with anybody. There are also going to be providers that, for convenience purposes, are going to be out of network for a member. To give you an example, if there's a member that needs chemotherapy 3 times a week and there's a hospital 5 minutes down the road and the in-network hospital's 50 minutes down the road, the member, for their own personal reasons, will go to the out-of-network hospital and, want somebody to do something about it to where they'll get in-network benefits. I can give you examples all day long, but out-of-network is not going to go away. It's what you can do about it by tuning into your clients and being razor sharp in your solutions. I'm seeing out-of-network utilization, for most clients, it tends to fall below 5%, but that 5% can really add up if you get a couple, ongoing or high cost episodes of care.
Thank you. Mike, I'm kind of interested in your perspective from a benefit advisor standpoint as to what you see with some of your clients on that particular piece, the scale with out-of-network benefits.
Great question, Nick. I agree with Jennifer that in terms of number of claims or quantity of claims that are occurring out of network, it is 5% or below for sure. But there are those instances where it can be one claim that blows the entire plan up. So when we build custom plans from the ground up, we're looking for all the different strategies we can implement to keep costs under control while disrupting the fewest number of people. And out of network should be near the top of the list in making sure you have a good strategy in place for the if and when those do show up. And oftentimes it's neglected. If you self-insure with a carrier model, you probably leave the out of network solution to them to provide, or you might rely on your third-party administrator to use their in-house solution. And if you're not paying attention, you could get really caught by surprise. So it's a small number of claims, but as Jennifer mentioned, the impact on plans overall can be huge. So having a good strategy in place impacts very few people, but benefits all of them if you manage it well.
Thank you. And I would tend to completely agree with you guys. We see the same, about 5 to 10% of our network claims or out-of-network claims are impacting the plan. And a lot of times those are larger claims that can have a huge impact on the financial performance. With respect to what are some of the relative advantages of network-based cost-containment solutions versus a reference-based pricing solution? And I was hoping Tom would be able to kick us off with that question.
Sure. So just to clarify, reference-based pricing solution, what the question's referring there is a package service where a cost containment firm accepts the out-of-network claims from the health plan and then attempts to get a very attractive price for that claim with that provider. So just to point out what we're talking about there. So the big difference here, and I would say the big advantage of the network-based solution, is there's a contract with a committed discount, and oftentimes that contract will come with a no balance billing provision. So in a reference-based pricing solution, since there is no contract, there's no contractual obligation out of the gate for the provider not to balance bill the patient, the covered member. But in a network-based solution, oftentimes, for example, all of our networks contain a no balance billing provision. So really, the direction of the health plan is reflective of how conservative or aggressive that they want to be in dealing with and addressing the out-of-network spend, because reference-based pricing represents a more aggressive approach. The other thing is, I think it's reflective of differences in underlying philosophy of the cost containment company. So, for example, in our situation, our objective is to establish a contract with that provider that stands the test of time. We are not looking just to get a low ball price on one claim. We want to build our network. And, in reference-based pricing, companies that are out of the gate reference-based pricing just are adopting a different philosophy. I'm not saying one's better or worse. I'm just saying they're different.
Thank you. Jen, is there anything you'd like to add to that particular discussion around relative advantages of a network-based cost containment solution versus the reference-based pricing? And would you like to potentially give us your opinion on reference-based pricing and what you see in the market?
Oh, well, to complement what Tom has already said, and he said it very well, with the PPO, the advantage of that is the PPO establishes a relationship with the provider. So if you have any catastrophic episodes of care, the provider is more likely to engage with the PPO to discuss that episode of care in that patient and to do the right thing for that patient. Sometimes it may be doing simple things like making an exception and waiving an outlier in a contract for an ongoing episode of care that's going to be devastating to the self-funded employer group that's important to them in their community. With reference-based pricing, there is no relationship with the provider. And the providers, tend to, not reciprocate and view reference-based pricing very favorably. There are a percentage of providers that, as long as they're getting paid and they're getting paid timely, they'll accept it, but there's no guarantee. And I, to give you a little background, I worked for a health sharing ministry administrator where everything was reference-based pricing for very large blocks of business. And the balance billing was significant, absolutely significant. And health share ministry clients are considered self-pay. So if the providers in that realm are willing to balance bill patients, you can imagine what they would do with patients that have insurance and they're self-funded or even fully insured. It's not received well. You can get yourself in trouble with it, but if you have a client, I'm not saying reference-based pricing is bad. It can yield some significant savings on claims for the majority of the claims. But again, when you get back to that 5% or less of the claims that won't be accepted, those bills can be very high. It could be catastrophic for the members, and it could be very messy. So it really depends on the client and what their tolerance is for noise and what they're trying to achieve with their cost containment strategy.
Thank you. I know that reference-based pricing can kind of come with some negative connotations sometimes, especially when members are ending up with some large balance bills. So thank you guys for kind of discussing some of the differences there. I appreciate that. Mike, is there anything you wanted to add to that particular conversation before we moved on?
No, no, not. I think that Jennifer and Tom did a great job kind of touching on it. I guess I will add a few thoughts that, all of these things that we're talking about today are tools that any good advisor should have in their toolbox, and you just need to find the right application for them. From my perspective, reference-based pricing has a time and a place, but it hasn't seen a lot of adoption in Michigan, where I'm based out of. So we're using independent PPO networks and independent TPAs in a more typical setting, which means, again, you need to have your eye on the ball when it comes to out-of-network claims, because you're giving up some using a lower discount using a rental network, let's say. And so you need to make sure you're managing every aspect of the plan. And if we're talking 5%, that can add up pretty quickly. So that brings up it just reinforces the importance of this conversation today.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'd also like to add one more little piece of information there is your stop loss carriers are going to evaluate your whole strategy, your whole claim strategy, in network, out of network, and make sure that you have control over those claims for their underwriting purposes.
And with stop loss strategies getting a lot more unique here over the past couple of years, I appreciate you bringing that up, because that's certainly something that's considered. So we'll go ahead and move forward here. The next question I'd like to direct towards Jen to start us off here. In the new post-COVID employment world, where employers are hiring a much larger percentage of the workforce virtually, what challenge is it placing on the network components of that group health plans?
Well, it's always been a challenge, even before COVID, because you've always had your pocket of employees that are out of area, your college students, your retirees, your snowbirds, your remote employees, people that go on vacation. But with COVID and so many employees working remotely now all over the United States, you really have to be able to deep dive in the analytics to find the best solution for your unique population. If you're a self-funded employer, because every PPO has their strengths and weaknesses geographically. So working with a solution partner that can do the analytics to find the best solution for you based on your population is definitely a good place to start. The PPO strategy needs to not only provide good provider penetration for your out of area members and in-network members, in-area members, but you also have to have a strategy in place for what happens when they go out of that network as well. Whether there's a wrap solution in place, a cost containment negotiations process in place, anything you could do to achieve savings that are optimal for the unique population of each client.
Thank you. Tom, I'm interested to get your opinion on some of those challenges that are arising from the virtual workforce that we're starting to see, and how the network components are being affected.
Yeah, for our health system customer base, it's a fairly large impact. So I've got to believe it is for others as well. And it really goes back to the impact first and foremost on the health plan and the structure of the health plan. I mean, I've got to believe there are employers out there that, have had the same health plan structure built around a set of employees that all were in that geographic area, maybe except for college students, et cetera, for the last 50 years. And now all of a sudden, some meaningful portion of their workforce is out of that geography. So, you have to look at the health plan structure and is it fit? And sort of the network is the tail on the dog of that, right? But it's also the enabler. So the more flexible the network solution, the more easier it is to adapt that health plan to meet these changing conditions. So I think when we get into some of these other questions here, the flexibility of the network solution to adapt to those changing needs becomes a new variable here of importance.
Yep. Anything else the panelists would like to add to that particular topic? So we'll go ahead and move on to our next question. I wanted to start this question directed with Jen as well. Jen, what client scenarios would most enjoy the benefits of an out-of-network wrap and why? And what scenarios would not benefit from having that out-of-network wrap solution?
Well, honestly, I can't think of any type of client that wouldn't benefit from an out-of-network wrap solution. Achieving savings on every claim should be the goal. Trying to get, especially your high dollar episodes of care, types of clients that should benefit from an out-of-network solution are, employers that are national in scope, or like Tom had mentioned, an employer group that has the majority of their workforce remote now, post-COVID. But achieving savings on a claim-specific basis is never a bad thing. So any client should enjoy an out-of-network wrap. And if they have a solution in place, what percentage of claims are falling out of the existing solution that they have in place? What can they do about those claims? All of those things should be taken into consideration. The cost of healthcare is outpacing inflation. So, having a strong focus not only on your in-network, but having it on your out-of-network, and having a good strategy in place for pre-service, concurrent, and retrospective claims is very, very important. The PPO, whether it's a primary PPO or a wrap PPO or an out-of-network PPO, is just one slice of the pie of a whole cost containment strategy. It's a very important piece, but it's not the only piece. So I would say definitely deep dive, work with solution vendors that can do the analytics to tailor solutions based around your client needs, your unique individual employer group needs.
Tom, I'm interested to get your opinion on that. What clients do you think would enjoy the out-of-network wrap, and what would it make the most sense for them to look at?
Where my head goes with this question is when a employer is making a change to their health benefit structure. What are they moving to? What are they moving from, and what are they moving to? And if they're in a situation where historically they've not had any employee friction and noise and balance billing and things like that, then structuring an out-of-network wrap properly to maintain that level of reduced friction is important relative to other solutions. So that's one thing I would say is just to add to what Jen said. I think it's a very important consideration when there's a change being made, either from a carrier to a TPA or between TPAs, and what was the network infrastructure and what are you moving to?
Thank you. Mike, would you like to share any feedback on that particular expertise from your perspective as an advisor in a consultant role who may benefit from having something like an out-of-network wrap?
I think anybody or any employer that works with an independent third-party administrator should have a good out-of-network solution. And the reason I say that is that that's really where we focus our attention is working with administrators that allow us to see every moving piece of the plan, and really work with pre-certification vendors that allow us to get ahead of the curve on things. If we're working with a good pre-certification vendor, we're going to know, number one, if we have an out-of-network claim coming, so then we can manage it well. Two, we can try to steer stuff. If it's going to be an ongoing claim, or maybe it's a cancer treatment, for example, we can make sure we manage it so it doesn't continue to be an out-of-network claim. So then that just leaves us with your emergent situations, or those kind of one-off unique situations that come up. And as I mentioned, if we're giving up the discounts that you might achieve with a BUCA, for example, we need to make sure we're managing every aspect of it. On the flip side, if we're working with a BUCA, who number one isn't going to tell you when their out-of-network claims coming, and number two have baked in their own cost containment solution for out-of-network claims, where they make money on that too, they really have zero interest in seeing that claim redirected, for example. So from my perspective, if you work with an independent third-party administrator, you got to have an out-of-network strategy in place.
Great. Thank you very much. We'll go ahead and move on to our next question here.
By the way.
Yes, that's very helpful.
I'll be
Moving
here all
on to
day.
our next question here. I'd like to direct this one over to Tom. Tom, what should a client be looking for when they're shopping for a network solution? Can you expand upon that?
Yeah, sure. I would say the historical variables are still in play. So, and every customer would rank order these potentially differently. So they're not in any particular order, but the service that's provided by that network administrator, the discount levels afforded, obviously, as Mike just alluded, and also the administrative cost. So what is the administrative cost associated with that network solution? So those are still in play. And then, as I mentioned earlier, I think the new variable is potentially flexibility, right? With a lot of the changes going on. I mean, in terms of No Surprises Act, the change in the workforce, very large changes to the workforce, other things that are changing in the macro environment, we would suggest require a level of flexibility with that solution to be able to adjust as required and meet the changing needs of the employee base and the employee health plan.
Thank you. Jen, I'm interested to get your opinion on what a client, or what you believe a client should be looking for when they're shopping for that network solution. Do you have any differing opinions than Tom?
No, Tom summed it up very well. I would just like to say, find a partner that is going to be proactive and not just reactive with your claims. A good partner should be analyzing your utilization patterns and your spend consistently, and keeping you in the fold of where your strengths are, where there are some gaps in, and what could be done about it. Good communications with the HR folks at the self-funded employer groups is really important, so they can keep communications with their members to let them know, look, you might need help with a primary care doctor. You got a lot of ER visits per se, and they're in the area. I just think, working with a partner that is earning, consistently earning your business by taking a true interest in not just charging you for using a network or a cost containment strategy, but performing for you and taking a lot of pride in achieving positive results and continuously earning your business.
Great, thank you. We'll go ahead and move on to our next question from our panelists here. This one is for Mike. Mike, can you provide us with an example of how you've addressed the large out-of-network claims in the past and how that's played out from your role?
Sure, great question. Appreciate you bringing that up. The best example we have in the last couple of years actually originated right at the beginning of COVID. And as I mentioned, we work with independent third-party administrators and high-quality medical management pre-certification vendors. In this particular case, this was Alt International Medical Management. Some of you folks probably know Nurse Deb, I'm sure. But right in the heat of COVID, we had a patient down in Tennessee, got admitted to a rural hospital, and that was an in-network hospital at the time. And the person's COVID condition worsened very quickly. And so ultimately, we were notified via AIM that this patient was being transferred to a large hospital in Tennessee, and it was an out-of-network hospital. And so at that point, there was nothing we can do about it. This person was in the ambulance, headed that way, needed ECMO like real time. And so it was what it was. But then because they looped us in and the third-party administrator in, we were able to stay on top of that claim it took us about a year for the whole thing to actually go through its entire process. We kept checking in every couple of weeks with the TPA. Have you seen the claim yet? Who's going to approach the hospital to make sure we don't pay, full boat retail on this thing, and on and on and on. And ultimately it went through and AIM worked with the hospital. The TPA, in this case, it was Cisco, did a great job, worked with the hospital, and neither one of them ultimately were able to achieve a discount. And so then it was about a $400,000 claim. So then we took a different approach and ultimately tracked down the CFO and wrote a persuasive email. And within a day, we had a single case agreement on it and got a 50% discount on the claim. Could I accomplish that every time? Absolutely not. But the point is having a good team communicating at all times, knowing what's going on, making sure we're paying attention to this, and then using if option A doesn't work, we got option B, and making sure you get options C, D, E, and F all kind of lined up to make sure that you don't pay full retail. And that's why in this particular case, if we had a Contigo in place, we wouldn't have had to do that ourselves. But it's making sure you're paying attention and that you're not allowing the claim to get paid until you've achieved a good result.
Yes, never taken it is what it is point of view on a claim.
Yeah, we threatened to loop in the local, in this particular case, we researched how much money the hospital received in ACA bailout funds and referenced to the hospital leadership that we thought the local news NBC affiliate might find that interesting, that they were gouging a COVID claimant. And long story short, we arrived at a place that we were all happy with.
I told one hospital system that was really charging a significant, it was probably about $7,000 above a Medicare rate, which, they could charge what they're going to charge. And I remember trying to negotiate with the hospital, and they wouldn't budge, wouldn't take a dime off the claim. And I told them that, there were a lot of TPAs that are in a chat now where we're making each other aware of egregious billing providers. And I'm afraid they're going to have to make the list. So then they were willing to talk. There was no such group, but it worked.
Just to add one thing, and I think what Mike shared, approaching it formularically like a campaign based on a proven stepwise process. I mean, that takes experience, right? To know yes. We're going to go to step 3 now. We're going to go to step 4. We got to send we got to engage the CFO directly. I mean, that's what it takes. You have to approach this in a structured way based on proven tactics that are laid out like a campaign. So that's what I heard you describe. So I appreciate that for sure.
Absolutely.
Yes, and the CFOs, a lot of times, they don't know what's going on with some of these high dollar claims. I remember a case where we had a hemophiliac member, and the member was getting billed over $400,000. And I wrote a letter to the CFO, and the CFO called me and said, I had no idea we had programs for this. And the member ended up with a zero balance. And that was one of our health system clients that the member had to go out of area for treatment. So, just as I said before, I can't say it enough. Pick up the phone, find a company that's willing to pick up the phone for you and have some conversations.
That's the biggest piece, is that you got to treat each one in a unique way, but very rarely do hospitals get full payment on out-of-network claims. And so you need to understand that that's where if you don't achieve some sort of discount, you've completely failed. And so you just need to make sure you talk to the right person. And I appreciate, Jennifer, your comments that, the CFO gets it, but the person you might be directed to at first doesn't see the big picture, and sometimes thrives on being the brick wall. And so just making sure you're finding out where the back door is and you're going in through the chimney if you can't get in through the front door or the back door or whatever it takes.
Tom, I wasn't sure if you wanted to share any examples of how Contigo clients now were addressing large out of claims in the past before coming to you guys. Not sure if you'd seen that or what you guys had experienced.
So I run the network division. There's another division of Contigo Health that's TPA BPO, and we manage health plans and run commercial health plans for customers. And so there's a lot of experience pretty much in the way that Mike described, dealing with large dollar claims. The difference now that we have the network division is that's an opportunity to create a network contract. Sometimes that matters, sometimes it might not matter, but as opposed to just solving a one one patient, one large dollar claim conundrum, we're actually saying this is an opportunity to grow our network, because if we have a contract with that provider, obviously we apply the discount and that's the end of the story. If we don't, then it's an opportunity to grow our network with that provider. That's the difference.
Thank you. Go ahead and move on to the next question for our panelists here. I'd like to direct this question at Mike again, actually. Mike, how big of a driver are solutions to the out-of-network claims when you're selecting a new plan administrator or a TPA?
Great question. Vary is the short answer. And the big thing that I want to point out, and actually somebody asked the question here a couple minutes ago in the chat, is how easy is it to change out-of-network solutions if you want to do that? And from my perspective, it should be a very easy thing to do. So we've worked really hard to identify third-party administrators that want the same things that we want. If we go to a conference or participate in a webinar like this and learn about a new solution like Contigo, and we think it might be the right solution for some of our clients, we want the answer to be yes when we bring that to the TPA, wherever point in the plan year it might be, for example. And we've identified some where the answer is always yes. And so it should be a very important thing. Simply, talking about specialty medications or whatever it happens to be, if you're building a custom plan and really trying to refine the plan's performance and manage it as tightly as you possibly can, you need to make sure that the quarterback, the TPA, is going to let you use any strategy that makes sense. And the market is so fluid at this point in time too, that the solutions we identify today are probably not going to be the solutions we need 2 years from now. So short answer to your question, it's a very important component, and we need to make sure as you're exploring new administrators, you ask the question, hey, if I bring you a new solution like X, how hard is it going to be for me to deploy that with our mutual client? And the answer better be that it's easy.
Great. Tom, you have any thoughts that you wanted to share on that?
I just echo, it's interesting, switching out the out-of-network wrap solution is one of the only things that you can do that could have a meaningful change that doesn't have to be done on the benefit year. And if the name of the wrap network is on the ID card, then you have new ID cards. But short of that, it's largely invisible to the member base. So it's one of those things that you can do in the middle of the year. If there's a compelling reason to do it, and you start realizing that your customers start realizing that savings immediately. So it is interesting from that perspective.
Great, thank you. We do have a question from an audience member, Brian Campbell, here. So I'll open this up to our panelists. Do many independent TPAs proactively utilize the 501R, the charity care options in their out-of-network cost containment proactively? Are you guys seeing that from your end at Contigo?
Yeah, I was just typing a response to Brian. So from my perspective, I'm not aware of any that are doing it. It doesn't mean that it's not happening. But the process, in my experience, limited as it is in terms of leveraging charity care, the process of utilizing that is very, very painful for the member themselves. Meaning the applications that you oftentimes have to complete from the hospital want to do a full, basically IRS audit of the individual's financial means and so on. And so obtaining that information from an employee is a very daunting thing to do. And so in the few instances where we've contemplated it, the employer has elected not to pursue that simply because it's going to be such a painful process for the plan member. That doesn't mean it's not a viable solution. I just haven't seen it done consistently.
Yeah, I could speak to that a little bit as well, coming from a former life, developing and running a TPA administrator for health sharing ministry accounts, where those are self-paying members, not insured, and they leaned on 501R strategy heavily. And it is a daunting process, as Mike alluded to. Not only that, but each hospital has their own process involved with that. And a lot of times the hospitals go by the entire family income, and you've got to be so close to the poverty line to qualify for that type of assistance with a lot of these hospitals. It is a daunting process, and it doesn't always work out based on family size income levels. But it is a strategy. It is definitely something that should be considered if the administrator can work out a decent process around that and have a good member advocate program in place to complement that and help walk them through that process.
Thank you very much.
Does that answer your question?
Brian, feel free to respond in the chat. Hopefully that's helpful as we move forward here. We'll go ahead and focus back over on the Contigo Health team. So I'll direct this question to Tom first, and we'll see if Jen has some feedback after that. Can you let us know how disruptive it is for a health plan to switch from one network solution to the other, and which party on a health plan is most impacted by that switch, whether it be the health plan members or the health plan administrators?
So answer that from two perspectives. Already we discussed the one, if we're, because this was primarily about the out-of-network component and is discussed, it's relatively frictionless, with the exception of whether or not that logo's on the ID card somewhere or a number. These are one of the few things you can do mid-benefit cycle. However, if you go beyond that and you're swapping out anything but the out-of-network wrap, then the answer depends heavily on how different the differences between the new network solution and the old network solution. And for the employees, for the covered members, it could be a real communication challenge to make sure that occurs in a smooth fashion. And I would say that for the providers in the network, the noise is very much correlated to the effectiveness of the communication campaign with the members. So I think a lot of the provider noise ends up being a direct result of a member not really realizing now that provider is not in the network and not, having been effectively transitioned. So I know this wasn't primarily to talk about the primary and primary supplemental networks, but I'd mention that anyway.
Jen, did you want to expand on that at all? Wasn't sure if you had some additional opinion that you want to provide.
Sure, I can expand on it a little bit from an operational.
I can jump in until she is able to come back, but changing the network solution is a very big move and not one that's going to be done frequently from our perspective. And so it's all about finding, again, the low-hanging fruit, the little items that has a big impact on the plan and low impact on the overall population. And so out-of-network's way more important and something you can address more consistently than changing your primary network if that's the way your plan is built.
Great. Thank you very much, Mike. We appreciate you jumping in there. It looks like her screen may be frozen. We'll go ahead and move on to our next question here. I'll go ahead and direct this one at Tom, if you can hear me okay. Tom,
I can.
What are the different types of cost containment solutions and strategies that are in the market right now? And are you willing to discuss some of the differences between them, some of the pros and the cons between them?
Yeah, I think we actually we covered this. The primary ones is either a network-based solution or a reference-based pricing, and we talked through a lot of the mechanics. So I actually think we covered this, unless there's someone in the audience that wants to spike out a more specific question, or unless, Mike, there's anything else you would add.
No, Tom, I think you did a nice job.
Jen,
I
can you hear us okay?
apologize. I'm back. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Good.
we
I was
can.
wondering if it was me. I was glad, Mike, you spoke when you did because I wasn't sure if it was just Jen or if it was me. So
It
good.
was just me. I've worked for Dell and Perot Systems, but I'm still technologically inept. So I think I just bumped something wrong on my laptop here. But regarding if we're still on the question of switching networks, if just talk through the timing of it with your administrator and your solution vendor to get a realistic time frame of when they can operationally get it up and running. Because the last thing you want to do is get into a log jam with your claims. Sometimes your solution vendors may have multiple relationships that they're tying into to make sure they get a discount somewhere for you. And sometimes they're at the mercy of the timing of those partners being able to accommodate the request as well. So just make sure that you communicate and get some realistic timeframes. Working with a vendor that has a lot of the solutions in house is optimal when you're capable of doing that. So there's less reliance on external entities to make the change happen.
Very helpful. Thank you, Jen. I'm going to go ahead and direct our next question to you, actually, since we have you back here. Jen, what should a broker be looking for in a good PPO partner, and what should they expect out of a full cost containment strategy?
Looking in a partner is a service. You need to make sure that you're working with a partner that is going to be accountable for watching over your trends to make sure they're doing the best they can to provide optimal savings and provider penetration. You need to make sure you're working with a partner that's proactive instead of reactive. There's some cost containment vendors out there that's all they do. And it's like I hate to call it a sausage factory, but that's what I call them, the sausage factories, where the claim comes in, it hits their system, it either applies a discount and it does or it doesn't, and it goes out the door without a second thought, regardless of what that discount level is. And for bulk claims and for low dollar claims, that may be fine. But if you have populations where you're seeing a lot of inpatient, outpatient, and ancillary services, and we're not just talking the physician claims, but a lot of high ticket dollar claims, you want a partner that's really going to be a strategy partner with you on a full cost containment strategy, just not the network, but on a prospective, concurrent, and retrospective basis where you're grabbing things at the point of pre-cert. Pre-cert isn't going to catch everything. So you're going to have those claims that are going to slide in the back door that could, like Mike had said earlier, could be very high dollar. And you have to get a good solution in place for that. So just be prepared to ask the hard questions to your vendors. How are you going to deal with every single one of these scenarios, and make sure they have a solid solution in place, and put some service level agreements in place to hold them accountable for what they're selling you.
Thank you. One of our last questions here before we get ready to turn it over to our Q&A section. I'll direct this one or lead this one off with Tom here. Tom, what technology solutions do you think might be best for a directory lookup or something that's easy for members to use?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting question because the nature of the technology ecosystem's changing now, and you have a lot more of these member-facing point solutions, and particularly with larger companies that are funneling through these portals. And it'd be interesting to see, do they start to take over the front door for finding providers more often? But right now, I would say that a lot of the large consulting organizations, at least for the large employers, it's they're managing more and more of that front door. So as it relates to specific vendor technology solutions, I can't comment on that. I don't know if Mike or Jen, you have that.
I'll just weigh in that, it's interesting, but it seems that provider directories are becoming a thing of the past. I mean, they are very much neglected from a lot of the independent PPO networks we work with. And the reason is that it seems that almost every PPO network has almost every provider in it in many cases. And so we also design plans to be somewhat agnostic about whether the provider's in network or out of network. We're trying to get people to the highest quality providers based upon objective data, and the plan's willing to pay even if the provider's out of network. So from our perspective, that's what our plans are doing. And so really, we rarely ever talk about a provider directory. But it is an important piece, because if you have a more traditional plan and you design it in network, out of network, you need to be able to allow people to figure out who is and who is out of network. But it's generally kind of a set and forget thing. Plan goes live. Is my doctor in? Yes, they are. Okay, great. And that's about the only time it comes up.
Jen, did you have anything you'd like to share on that piece, or do you feel like they covered it pretty well?
They covered it well. I would just also encourage members to call the services number on their ID card if they have questions about whether their provider's in or out of network. Never ask the provider. The list is constantly changing, and there's partnerships out there that the provider may not recognize the network, or they get a new office manager and she's not real familiar, or she's looking at a list of managed care contracts that's outdated. It's best just to call your benefit plan and let them advocate on your behalf and help you with those things.
Great, thank you very much. So I know that we've come to the last 5 or 10 minutes of our presentation here. I just wanted to give an opportunity to each of our panelists to kind of share their closing thoughts and their general idea or understanding of where we are moving here in this out-of-network space. So Jen, I'd like to turn it over to you first if you'd like to share any of your closing thoughts around the out-of-network solutions you've been talking about.
Sure. Overall, I'd like to just reiterate that having an out-of-network or an solution, whether it's to pay claims out of network or it's a wrap network where you're still paying claims in network, but it's a network that's out of your geographic region, it's very important to have those processes in place with a very, I don't want to call it an aggressive vendor, but a vendor that's going to aggressively keep on top of your claims and work with you to try to delight you and continue to please you and call you with these great stories that, hey, guess what? We just intercepted a big one and here's what we saved you. So, a company that's going to wake up every morning excited to do that for you. So pick the right vendor, make sure that they are servicing you according to their service level agreements, and keeping you in the loop of where they're having some struggles and where they're having successes for you, and to keep doing the best job that they can for you.
And as Mike mentioned earlier with one of his examples, sometimes these can be hundreds of thousands of dollars. So if you're out there staying in touch with these systems and making sure you're going through the appropriate avenues, the money is there to be saved. So Mike, I'd like to turn over to you for some of your final thoughts from your perspective.
Yeah, no, I appreciate this conversation very much, and Contigo having us all here today, because this is an important thing and it's oftentimes overlooked. And I think for the brokers on the call, you may think, hey, I've never seen a large out-of-network claim, and so I don't even know why we're having this conversation. You might be able to say the frequency of something like this happening that really could disrupt a plan significantly is as likely as maybe having an aggregate claim, which doesn't happen very often, if ever. But when it happens,
more often these days, unfortunately.
That's exactly right. And when it happens, it's a big deal. And so that's why it's important to make sure you got a plan in place. And I think the kind of default mode is to rely on whoever the administrator is to provide the solution on out-of-network claims. And if you're not asking the questions or doing your homework, it could turn around and bite you. So that's why I think it's important to have this conversation. And again, I appreciate the Validation Institute and Contigo for really bringing up what is often an overlooked topic.
Thank you very much. Tom, love to turn it over to you for some of your final thoughts here as we get ready to close out in a couple of minutes.
Yeah, just following Mike's comments there, it's the advisors and brokers are a lot closer to what's going on with your clients and their health plans, and will be able to sense and respond when you see these things emerge. I'd say the only thing I'd add is, again, this is an easier configuration addition change to make than other components of the health plan. So when the opportunity arises, it's one of those ways to make a meaningful change and do it quickly and demonstrate the value back to your account. So I just encourage you to keep your ears perked for these kinds of opportunities, because they could be high impact to your role.
Without a doubt. Yes. Thank you very much. I'd like to thank our panelists for taking the time to join us today. Very informative conversation. I really appreciate everything that you guys were able to contribute. I'd like to turn it back over to Sean with the Validation Institute for any final questions that we may have from our audience before we close out our discussion today.
Great, thanks, Nick. Just a couple questions we'd love to squeeze in if we can. One of them comes in, what's the primary driver of out-of-network claims?
So from Sean, from our perspective, what we're seeing, it's kind of your really unique situation. So an emergency situation, for example, in the one that I described from COVID, someone was transferred from an in-network to an out-of-network hospital. People are traveling, or it's your really kind of unique or kind of dialysis, for example, could be one that comes to mind, or other kind of niche type claims. So it's not your run-of-the-mill kind of typical stuff, and at least that's what we're seeing.
Yeah, I can give you a good example.
Great.
I can give you a good example of that. We had a health system client that, of course, used their own health system as their in-network solution, and they had a member that needed a spinal lumbar fusion surgery, extremely expensive. We're talking about a $300,000 surgery, and this wasn't his first one, and his spine was so deteriorated that he had to go see an orthopedic surgeon that was highly specialized up in another state, and it was out of network. They didn't have a network in place out of their area because they didn't have any out of network members. And he had to go there, and we stepped in and we negotiated, and their plan paid 50% of a usual and customary rate. The surgeon didn't respond to negotiation attempts before the surgery was conducted. So after the surgery was conducted, the member ended up with a $53,000 bill. The hospital ended up contracting with a really nice significant discount, but the surgeon never responded. So retrospectively, we stepped in, and because it was out of network, the bill didn't go through any audits on the surgeon fees. And long story short, we were able to discount that claim from $53,000 that the member owed down to $3,000. So, had a network program been in place out of network, we wouldn't have had to do all that. But again, that's why I'm saying and want to reiterate, the network strategy is one piece of the puzzle in controlling your costs.
All right, that is a great example. We are just about out of time, so I want to thank everyone for joining us today. I want to thank our 4 speakers. Thank you to Contigo Health for sponsoring and making our session possible. Just a reminder, everyone, the webinar has been recorded, and you will receive an email with a link to the video so that you can view it again. Thanks again for joining us, everyone. Have a great day, and this now concludes today's discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you
all for joining.